Hello. So let us now move on to the last segment of week 8 technology enabled assessments. In this lecture, we will talk about the use of generative AI for assessments. So what is generative AI? So that has become a topic that we cannot ignore. So in our context, we are looking at generative AI systems that create new content. Any generative AI system is something that will create new content. So in our context, it could be just a text, questions, the feedback, different scenarios and so on, which are useful for assessments. So generative AI in general is trained on vast data to mimic human-like outputs. Okay, so which means that generative AI as a technology is focused on producing output that is useful. Okay, so there are basically the key trait here is to recognize patterns, right? It will based on what information that you are trying to extract. So it will try to find patterns amongst the vast amount of data, and gives you a great amount of flexibility, adaptability in terms of the nature of the content that you want to generate. Okay, so which means that these are all generic tools, and our focus on the use of generative AI is going to be on the pedagogy and not on specific platforms as far as this particular lecture is concerned. So let us look at some of the motivation for using GenAI for assessments. Okay, so GenAI can be used to scale this particular whole assessment methodology to provide personalized learning. Okay, so when we have diverse set of students, right? So when we are talking about diverse set of students, we are talking about students at different levels of understanding or subjects which are very radically different from each other, and even the nature of the assessment itself, whether it is multiple choice questions versus handwritten exams. So it supports enormous amount of diversity in terms of the various kinds of learning that we are able to provide through assessments. The second major use case for generative AI is that it saves the instructor time on routine and repetitive tasks. And as you can imagine, the most routine and repetitive task could be the grading itself, right? So it can we will see how what are the scenarios where generative AI can save enormous amount of instructor time on grading, for example. And there could be other routine repetitive tasks as well. The simple task of creating the question paper itself can be quite repetitive, right? So and then which can lead to some amount of errors, or even we talk about so much reliance on PYQ, previous year question papers. So these are all the limitations of the old style assessments, wherein generating new questions becomes a little bit of a challenge for instructors. So many of those repetitive things can be automated very nicely. Okay, and also, right, as I said, when it can provide this personalized form of an environment for the learning, assessments also can be personalized, which means that it increases the engagement of the learners with the material that you are providing, or whatever is it that you are teaching, because it can associate a lot of context associated with the assessment itself. In fact, one of the more popular terminology that we use is called adaptive assessments, right? So can we have assessments which understand the current assessment itself and fine tune and change the kind of follow-on questions that you ask? Now, if you look at a lot of standardized tests today are moving towards adaptive assessments. Okay, and also, one of the challenges, why do we think we conduct so few assessments, right? We probably have some monthly quizzes, and there's probably an summative end-term examination, maybe a mid-term examination in between. These days, from a pedagogy point of view, there are also there's a lot of recommendations to have checks in between your learning in itself, just to see that if the learners are able to understand. So we are now in a position to use GenAI to create lots of low stakes formative checks as we go along. In fact, as an instructor, you may even choose that these things will not be used for final grading, but it is mainly to give feedback to the learner, saying that at whatever module is being covered, is their understanding good enough, or do they need to review it again? Okay. And finally, it provides a lot of, you can use the data from these assessments and then feed it back to AI itself to suggest improvements to the instructions, or to suggest improvements to the instructional material, or to suggest improvements to the assessment itself. As we saw, for example, are our assessments having enough discriminative capabilities to be able to find out good students from students who need additional help, for example, right? So these are the kind of feedback that AI can give as well. Okay, so before we proceed further, just to ensure that all of us are on the same page, I would want to quickly highlight on the key AI concepts, generative AI concepts, right? So the term that you keep hearing frequently is called something as a model. And more generically, or more specifically, I should say, we use the term LLM, large language models, small language models, and so on. Yes, by default, generative AI relies extensively on LLMs, large language models. So in general, what is a model in the AI context? It's just about massive amounts of knowledge, okay, which is organized in the form of a big network of concepts and content, and so that is built by training, right? So which is by training that particular system on lots and lots of data. Okay, so for example, if you are talking about imagine a large language model which has got a subset sub model inside that, which is trained on large number of assessments that have been conducted in a given subject area, right? So a lot of, I just talked about PYQs, and all these previous year question papers are available online. So what these large language models do is they will go through those previous year question papers and then learn from it and store it in the form of a large network of concepts called as the model. So once this model is available, then the next thing as an instructor that you would engage with is using the prompts. Okay, prompt is the term that is associated in generative AI to something which serves as an user input on the content that you want the system to generate, right? So a GenAI system, if wanted to generate some content, so it is triggered using what is known as a prompt. So for all practical purpose, you can assume prompt is a question that you ask or an instruction that you give to the AI system. And finally, we talk about generation. So generation is essentially the output produced in response to a prompt given by the user. So in general, so you would in your prompts, you will mention what is the content that you want, what is the format that you want, and who is it for, and who is asking this particular thing, what is the context. So once you give all those inputs, then it will generate the content as per your requirement. Okay, so I will use this terminology going forward when I'm talking about the various scenarios. Okay, so let us look at the role of GenAI in assessments. So the first most very useful scenario is the using GenAI for assessment item generation. Okay, mind you, from our previous lectures, you will know that we use the term called assessment item as synonymous being questions, but anything that you use for assessments. Okay, so which means that you try to give a prompt which will automatically generate questions for you from based on any subject that you want, based on the kind of questions that you want, whether you want an MCQ, whether you want what we talk selection type questions, which is like an MCQ, true false kind of a thing, or a descriptive type questions. What is the subject? What is the length of the answer that you are expecting? What is the complexity, difficult, easy? Those kind of inputs that you can give, and it can generate the questions. So assessment item generation is one important role that GenAI can play in your assessments. And second is the evaluation of the assessment and the assessment item itself. Okay, so converting any response into a grade or marks. Okay, I want to slightly distinguish at this stage between the term evaluation. We already used the term evaluation, and then we said, when we presented the MCQ, we said it is evaluation can be automatic or manual. So therein, typically in that context, we assume that anything which is descriptive, say for example, which is handwritten, all those require manual evaluation. So here now what we are saying is, what was hitherto manual evaluation can now be automated using GenAI. So I'm still not talking about something that GenAI can do which previously was not possible to automate. Right? MCQ, it was possible to automate the evaluation of multiple choice questions already. So there's no contribution of GenAI here. Okay. Other activities which we were doing manually in the until now is something which can be automated using generative AI. Okay. So what is it? What are the different kinds of assessment item generation that GenAI can do? It can generate, of course, it can generate multiple choice questions themselves. It can generate case studies. It can create problem statements, and depending upon the kind of complexity in your respective subjects, right? So all of those things it can do. And one other important thing that it can also do is, either you can leave it open and then ask it, rely on it to use the large language model to generate the questions, or you can also give your own previous year question papers and ask it to generate similar questions, right? So that it will be able to match 3 marks questions to a 3-mark question on the same topic. It is definitely intelligent enough to, given a question, it is intelligent enough to understand what is the topic of that specific question, and you ask it to generate one more question, it will generate of the comparable complexity and difficulty levels. And it can also be made to generate adaptive questions, which will adapt the difficulty it can adapt the difficulty levels of those questions to the student's own proficiency, right? So for example, what you can do is, you can upload, for example, as an input, a student's marks in the previous assessment. And then you can say that, okay, given this is where the student is, generate new set of assessments, maybe for improvement on the same concepts, or so it will be able to adapt this assessment to that specific student's needs. So what it means is that it really tightly automates the pedagogy to the generation, right? So now, previously, until now, you were able to do all of these things to the best of your ability given your time constraints. Now you can say that you can let all the hard work to be done by GenAI, whereas you provide very intelligent inputs as an instructor. Okay, and of course you can also ask it to generate real world scenarios, because we keep saying that especially for experiential learning, you can even ask AI to generate lab activities and assessments, which is typically, normally every time we have a fixed set of experiments or activities in our lab courses. Okay, so we can definitely use generative AI to be more creative and give newer variety of activities as part of a lab exercise, instead of the students picking up the previous year's lab activities and not doing anything new. They'll simply copy the previous activities and complete the lab exercises, right? So here you can make it more interesting by giving them new challenges as well. Okay, and finally, you can also use generate assessment items for formative assessments, right? So what do we mean by formative assessment? Suppose this week you are completing a particular topic. So what you can do is you can list the topics that you have covered this week, and you can ask it to generate a small quiz for say 10 marks, which is focusing only on the assessment items relevant to this week's lectures that you have conducted. So this can eventually it is entirely up to you to say that whether it will influence the grade or not, but then at least it will it will increase the self-awareness of the students to say what is their own level of understanding, and if they need to put in more effort. You remember when we talked about the essay Moodle quiz. So one of the parameters was the number of attempts. And if you recall, I mentioned that you can set it to unlimited attempts for formative kind of assessments, and then set it to 1 for a final exam kind of a setup. Okay, so all those things can now be enabled using generative AI. Now, when we talk about personalized assessment, what is it that we mean, right? So basically, you can have it analyze the student data, and what we can do is we can create a question bank, right, which is tagged appropriately with the different Bloom's level, Bloom's taxonomy levels, or knowledge levels, and even topic wise, right? So, and difficulty levels and so on. All those tags, and then you keep a question bank, and then you can ask AI to say that now, given this particular student, right? So I want the student to improve in this particular topic, in this particular area. Can you generate new questions? So it can definitely be need based at an individual student level. Okay, and we can also generate personalized assessments based on different learning styles. Okay, so it can support different paces, different learning styles. So if there are problem solving kind of questions that you want to create, you can do that. And if somebody is extremely good with memorizing and reproducing, that's also an important skill in some areas, right? So depending upon that, we can, if somebody is already good with those kind of questions, you can slowly nudge them to pick up the other, to get used to other types of questions and so on. Okay, so the bottom line is that it definitely moves beyond one size fits all approach. Okay, and we should look at it not necessarily as an examination, but use this as a pedagogical tool to increase the effectiveness of this teaching learning process. Okay, yeah. So basically, you take any DSA is a computer science topic of data structures and algorithms, or databases, or circuits. You take anything, right? You create adaptive problem sets. Adaptive problem sets means you conduct one particular assessment, and based on the response that is given to it, it can give more. So if a student gets a specific type of question consistently incorrectly, right? So what AI can do is it can generate a detailed explanation for everything, all the mistakes that the student is doing, and provide additional learning resources, and then reassess, right? So this whole cycle can be automated using GenAI. Now, AI enhanced evaluations. Okay, so definitely it will improve the efficiency, because we already saw that one way to increase efficiency of evaluation is to use those assessment item types, okay, which are automatically evaluatable. That's where we use the term selection type items. So selection type items are easily evaluatable, but then we already know that not all examinations and assessments can be based on selection type questions. In other words, we cannot rely purely on an MCQ in a given course. So we do want to give descriptive type of questions, because if I want to move beyond remember, I want them to understand, and then I want to be able to show how to apply some of the concept that they have learned. Then we have to go beyond MCQs. So once we create those kind of question papers, and they are generally pen and paper based, right? So we want to automate that particular grading. It can do that. Okay, so definitely selection type it can do, but descriptive questions can also be done, right? So these descriptive questions will contain, say, short answers, essay type questions, diagrams, right? So all of this can be automatically evaluated. The second biggest strength of using generative AI for assessment is the feedback that it is capable of giving. Okay, so when we talk about, if we recall our own manual evaluations that we used to do, right, and the best feedback that we go, right, so we are faced with doing evaluations of, say, 60 answer books in a given section. Okay, so we generally keep on, we proceed with our grading, we'll put a tick mark, and then we'll put some marks. And if there is some lacunae in the answer, right, these are the things that I used to do, right? So you put a question mark on a specific point, which is implicitly saying that I don't understand what it is, or why have you written this particular point, or this particular point is not relevant, right? There are so many cues that we give, but without necessarily having the time to give detailed feedback. Okay, now AI can do that for you. Okay, in my experience, the quality of the feedback that AI can give is is way better than the feedback that we are able to give as part of our manual evaluation, right? So what we do is nowhere close to what the capability of a generative AI evaluation. So this is something is the biggest strength of using AI for evaluations, the ability to give detailed and positive constructive feedback at each item level for each response, right? So now you imagine you are conducting an assessment for 60 students, and there are 10 questions in the examination. So we are talking about 60 multiplied by 10, 600 responses that are there. So using AI, it is now possible to give 600 specific evaluations, more importantly 600 specific feedback, okay, which is specific to that particular response given by that particular student for that particular question. Okay, if not for anything else, just for the specific feedback capability of generative AI, I think it is way better than what we are able to do as part of manual grading. Okay, and from a teacher perspective, from an instructor perspective, you can ask AI to summarize all those 600 evaluations that we talked about, and point out what are some of the common errors that they are doing, what are the misconceptions that are there amongst the students, right? And this is exactly what we did when we looked at the analysis of the assessments that we saw in Moodle. But then that was limited to only an automatically evaluated MCQ kind of questions. So we are saying that capability can now be extended to descriptive examinations as well. Okay, and as I said, this is way better than what manual evaluations are capable of doing. Okay, so what are some of the ways in which you can integrate GenAI with LMS? Okay, one is through plugins. Okay, depending upon the learning management system that you are using, you should look for AI plugins in the marketplace, as they say. Okay, so if you look at the Moodle, so as a system administrator, you can ask the system administrator to go into the Moodle marketplace and specifically look for AI plugins. There are many new plugins that are being tried out. I should admit, especially with respect to Moodle, some of them may be in initial stages, but there are that is the strength of your open source community. So there are constant improvements that are taking place. So I would strongly urge you, in case you are using Moodle or any LMS, you form a set of interested faculty members and experiment and evaluate these plugins. Okay, so let me put forth a couple of usage scenarios of how you can use generative AI. The first scenario is, let us say you are using Moodle, okay, and we saw how to manually create questions, how to create a MCQ question, how to assign marks, etc., right? Now, what you can do is you can use any AI tool to generate questions, say in CSV format. And what is the input that we have to give to do this? You give a prompt, right? So you give a prompt, and in the prompt you can include, right, how many questions need to be generated. So you can say that generate 10 questions, okay, on which topic. So you can say that on this specific topic of, say, Karnaugh maps, say in digital design. So that is the second thing that you mentioned. And you can say in which format you want the questions to be. You say that you want the questions to be given in a CSV format. Okay. So once you do this, once you give that particular prompt, it will give you a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated values. The CSV files, if you don't want to do anything else, you can simply double click on it, download it, double click on it, and look at it in Excel. Okay, so that's possibly the first thing that you have to do. So you don't have to blindly accept anything that AI is generating. So you review it. You review those 10 questions, and then you convince yourself that this is exactly what you want, right? As part of the prompts, you can also give as many additional inputs as you want, right? You can say what is even the Bloom's taxonomy that you want, and what is the knowledge level that you want, and so on, right? So all those inputs you give, and you can even map it to a course outcome if you wish. Okay, so all those inputs you give, you review the CSV file that is generated. So once you are satisfied with it, then in that CSV file itself, you can make any changes that you want, any corrections that you want, and so on. And by the way, this is an important step you should never skip. So once you are satisfied, then you can ask AI itself to convert that particular CSV file into a format that can be imported into your learning management system. In this example that I am giving, it could be what is known as a Moodle XML format. This is a format called Moodle XML format. So you say you upload a CSV file, you ask it to convert it to a Moodle XML format. So what it is going to do is it is going to generate a new file which is in Moodle XML format. You download it and save it, and you go into Moodle and then you import it. And I think that is something that we covered in the previous lecture. You click on the import, you choose the Moodle XML format, and then upload this XML file, and lo and behold, with a couple of clicks, you have an entire question bank which is automatically generated and available for you to use in your quizzes. Okay, now let's look at the second scenario. Okay, so in the first scenario, we are still using automatic evaluation, but the questions, MCQ questions, for example, are not manually typed in, but we are using AI to generate it. What is the second usage scenario? As we said, we are not going to be satisfied conducting a whole set of assessments based on MCQs. What if you want to do the traditional pen and paper examination? So what you can do is you can possibly use one of those examination tools which are already there. So you may want to keep in touch with so many offerings that are out there. So there are vendors who provide intelligent examination tools with which you can do scenario 2. Okay. So whatever be the tool, what it will allow you to do is they will possibly give you a screen for authoring the question paper. So in that question paper, so they may give you a button called Generate using AI. And then the prompt itself is you have full control on the prompt that you want. What is the topic? What is the subject? What is the topic? And anything else, right? Including the Bloom's taxonomy. Now you can say that give me apply style questions and for how many marks that you want, right? The whole details that you give, and it will generate the question for you. Okay. So once that question is generated, you can do the question paper itself in the old fashioned way. So you can copy paste that question, put it into your Word document and create your traditional question paper. So once you have created the question paper, you can send it to your examinations office. So they will print it, okay, and then they will use it to administer this examination in the traditional pen and paper. Okay, so they will do the traditional pen and students will write the answers, using pen on an answer booklet and so on. Now so that answer booklet goes to your examination office. So now the examination office, what it can do is that now these days I see that most of the universities and college already have the ability to scan and upload these handwritten answer booklets. So you get that done. Once it is now in this AI enabled examination tool, until now the steps are still the same. So you still need to upload it into the examination tool. But then previously, even if it is uploaded to the examination tool, as teachers, we used to open each answer book and then do the manual evaluation using that online tool and assigning the marks. That in itself increases your efficiency. But now the magic of generative AI can be brought in, right? So now what you can do is generative AI which is integrated directly into the tool, can be invoked to complete the grading of all those, whatever, assuming 60 answer booklets, and then each one containing say 10 answers, all those 600 answers can be automatically evaluated. And then it is just not that we are blindly relying on AI to do the grading. So as an instructor, you can still exercise control by asking AI to grade these things as per the rubric that we as instructors have chosen. Okay, so it's not as if we are simply offloading all our work and then we pray that it works fine, but we can exercise a good amount of control. And from personal experience, the technology has improved immensely to be able to do this in a very reliable way. Okay, and all I want to point out, without even naming any specific tool, is that the state of the art is such that we can get very satisfactory results using this. Okay, so to summarize, we can use generative AI to improve our effectiveness as teachers. I think this has become a mandatory element of our responsibilities and effectiveness, to increase our own effectiveness as course instructors. And secondly, the extent of automation is to the extent that we will now be able to conduct very frequently assessments and, more importantly, give timely feedback. Because especially if you are conducting formative assessments don't serve their purpose if you don't give timely feedback. And generative AI can definitely be used, and it is capable of being able to do that. Okay, and look for AI plugins for the LMS of your choice, for the tools of your choice, and also when we looked at it, so we looked at two specific scenarios. So there is a whole spectrum. Now, if you now go back to the very first lecture, we talked about the whole life cycle of an assessment, right? you can bring in generative AI in any stage of that particular life cycle to the and then based on your own comfort level, right? It is not an all or nothing scenario, right? So generative AI's integration into your own assessment process is not an all or nothing scenario. So you go back and review the whole assessment life cycle and look for opportunities to improve that stage of your assessment life cycle for using AI, right? And in this specific lecture, we have already seen how can it help us being more effective with respect to the assessment instrument generation and the evaluation process as well. Okay, so on this note, so this pretty much concludes the technology based assessments and the use of technology for assessments to make it the whole course delivery experience much more effective and even enjoyable to both the instructor and the learners.